start with that Thursday game you mentioned. Obviously, was a little more competitive than I think some of us thought, as the Minnesota Vikings, they played the Philadelphia Eagles, a little bit of rematch of last year. Did not go as last year went, although it kind of was looking like it was going to head that way. As the Eagles, they win 34-28. Well, yes, they win. They are 2-0. Seems like a lot of people are kind of realizing they're off to a slow start. Not as dominant as maybe some would have liked. Nonetheless, Eagles 2-0, Vikings 0-2. What were your thoughts on the Thursday night game?
Well, luckily for me, the Vikings hit that little backdoor cover for our spread, literally by half a point. So shout out to the Vikings for doing that. Overall, I think this game kind of went as expected for me. I will say the one thing that really stood out is Jalen Carter is a freaking beast. Like, I mean, you and I were both high on him anyway, but the fact that through 2 games, I think week 1, he was like the second highest graded defender in the whole league. And in this game, he popped 2. He is already a monster, and that's really scary for me to see. But other than that, I mean, the game, for the most part, kind of went as expected. I will say the one thing about the Eagles that kind of surprised me was just how poor the passing attack overall looked. I don't know how you felt about it, but really outside of Devonta Smith getting like 2 big plays, because I can't remember exactly how long both of them were, but they're both pretty long passes. Like he had the 63-yard touchdown, and then I can't remember how long his other one was, but he had like the 2 big plays, but that was kind of it for Hurts's like overall passing attack. And then eventually they finally realized, like, let's just run the ball, and it started working, and DeAndre Swift ate him up. And so I think that was somewhat encouraging to see from the Eagles coaching staff, because I know that this was a criticism of mine a couple years ago, was that when Sirianni first took over, I remember there was a game where they played Dallas and Dallas beat them, and they ran the ball like 8 times. And I was really surprised. Obviously, the Eagles since then have been a much more run-heavy team. And so it was good to see the Eagles adjust and actually like figure it out and start running the ball in the second half. But yeah, overall, I was pretty surprised at how poor their passing attack was. Not like inefficiency or anything. I mean, Hurts was 18-23. It's just like stuff didn't open up. And I'm not that impressed with the Vikings secondary, which makes me confused. And then for the Vikings, I mean, it was the same deal that I said previously, is that I feel like the passing attack is going to work against this Eagles secondary, and that's kind of what happened. The Eagles secondary, I think they've got some holes, and Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson were able to expose them a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, it's week 2, so once again, still not overreacting. But yeah, I mean, the fact that the Vikings are 0-2, I wouldn't say I'm shocked.
Yeah, I want to hit, you mentioned the passing game. I'm with you. I feel like this, even going back to week 1, like I feel like this Eagles team has gone off, especially the offense, has gone off to the slow start, and especially in the passing game. I don't know if you remember too, Thursday night, I mean, there was that clip of A.J. Brown getting frustrated, talking with Jalen Hurts, and they were winning. It's not like they were losing. So it's obvious things are not clicking fully. Could that be maybe, that their starters didn't play much in preseason? Possibly. Or it could be very well the fact that their offensive coordinator, Shane Steichen, he left to Indianapolis. So that could also be, just that loss could be being felt right now, is what I feel like could be it too. And also, this is the Eagles team that came onto the scene last year. And so now teams, you go from hunters to being hunted. As we are. Even if you didn't win the Super Bowl, you were in the Super Bowl, you won the NFC, everyone's watching, the Jalen Hurts offense. Okay, how can we slow him down? So, and I think we saw a little bit of that too. I mentioned in our preview to this game is that, Brian Flores coming from that New England tree. I'm sure he went back and looked at see what Bill Belichick did, and try to kind of replicate those same things. And obviously, Minnesota less talented defensively than the Patriots, and we obviously saw that with, like you mentioned, the long Devonta Smith touchdown, where it was basically just a pitch and catch. He got a free release and ran, and there's obviously some sort of miscommunication there, I'm assuming. But other than that, it was tough struggles for Jalen Hurts and the gang, and he even got sacked a couple times too. So be definitely interesting to see going forward. But It was a good day for DeAndre Swift owners because it was hashtag free DeAndre Swift as he had a monster game. And like you mentioned, once they started leaning on the run, that's kind of when they started really kind of generating more offense and more points. But it is concerning going forward. Their defense, like you mentioned, especially their pass defense, they lost Avonte Maddox. Seems like he may be out for the rest of the year, and he's usually their kind of nickel guy. So depth was already a concern, becoming more of an issue going forward. And as for the Vikings, I mean, not too shocked. I mean, you could see just by the box score, they couldn't really run the ball at all. So they were one dimensional. And like as good as the Viking, they were really good, in that one dimension. Kirk Cousins 4 touchdowns, 200 plus yards. But once it's the NFL, when you have 4 fumbles and you lose them all, like you're gonna lose. And so credit the Eagles defense, like at least I will say that in regards to generating those turnovers while their offense is still trying to find their way. So big win for the Eagles. Kind of just staying afloat, get the extra few days rest going into week 3. While for the Vikings, cue that one clip, but they are who we thought they were, as now they're 0-2, and definitely not off to that hot start like they had last year, which isn't surprising, at least to John and myself, since we expected this out of them. So. Yeah.
Also, can I just say on the Vikings, too, they now have to go play the Chargers, who are also 0-2. So, I mean, both teams could get a little desperate in this one. And, the Chargers have a lot of talent, so that's kind of a little bit of a scary game. Then you got the Panthers, but then after that, Chiefs. Then you get the Bears, but then after that, Niners. So, I mean, the schedule the next 5 games, you got 2 games that you should win, and then you got 3 that could be very, very difficult. And at that point, if you're sitting at 2-5 going into week 8, which is around, the trade deadline, you got to start wondering, Kirk Cousins has 1 year left on his contract. There's maybe some QB needy teams like the Jets out there. Are the Vikings maybe considering blowing it up? That's kind of what I'm wondering right now.
It would be very interesting to see going forward, though. Yeah, that's definitely very interesting because people forget last time, there was a little bit of uncertainty if Kirk was going to extend before he signed his current extension. We'll see how that pans out for the Vikings. But speaking of them and the NFC North, let's stay there as we go to the Sunday games. Going to start off with my Packers as the Atlanta Falcons managed to get the win at home, going to 2-0 and also staying 2-0 at home as they went 25-24. So very close game. Late comeback for the Falcons. They scored 13 points in the fourth quarter to come back from 24-12. Packers scored 0, I believe. Before that last drive, the Packers were 3 and out for most of the fourth quarter, second half. So I think it was fourth quarter. So nonetheless, obviously I have my thoughts, but what were yours in regards to the Falcons' win here?
I thought it was a good win. For a lot of the parts, I kind of felt like the Falcons were not really in control. It felt like Green Bay, especially going into that fourth quarter, was going to close it out. I was pretty impressed for the most part with Jordan Love. Just the fact that he was able to throw 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, like that's always a good thing. That said, the just overall offense's ability to move the ball for Green Bay was not that impressive. I mean, in terms of yardage, like you guys had half of the Falcons' total yards. They had 224. The Packers had 224. The Falcons had 446. And so not only was I not super impressed with the offense's ability to move the ball, but man, the defense giving up that much. I don't know. It felt like there's still some concern here, basically. And I don't know. I'll leave it to you because you're the Packers fan. You probably have a little bit better take because you actually watched the full game. I was watching highlights of Red Zone when this game was happening. But yeah, I don't know. You've always talked about the run defense over the years. I know they've added different pieces, but that was kind of the one thing that worries me going into this game was the Falcons are such a run heavy team. Have the Packers fixed it? If they haven't, then Bijan's going to run wild, and I can see a world where like Desmond Ridder doesn't have to do too much, and the Falcons win the game. And I mean, just based on the stuff that I saw and even looking at the stat line here, it kind of looks like that's how it went.
So honestly, I know the score indicates it was a close game. I will say Falcons offense, kind of like you alluded to, kind of had their way with the Packers defense, although it wasn't like a bunch of gashing plays. It was just the typical Atlanta. Like I said in our group chat, we got Arthur Smith. Like Bijan obviously had a really good game, but I mean his longest run was 19 yards. So it was just a lot of intermediate gashing of the Packers defense. I'm sure many people have seen a couple clips. Obviously, he's really good as advertised. I think that was evident to me in that game. I mean, making people miss and such. He's amazing. And in regards to Ritter, like I think we kind of saw the Ritter experience where, especially in the first half, was not particularly good. But credit to I'm gonna give credit to Arthur Smith and the offense of coaching staff because they still found ways to move the ball. Like I know they only scored. I'm trying to double check. They only scored one They scored 2 touchdowns, but they did get into the red zone quite a bit as they did have a lot of field goals. Even missed a field goal by Youngway or an extra point. Excuse me. At one point, they also had went for it on a 4th down, kind of outside of field goal range. So, like you mentioned with the yards discrepancy, Falcons kind of had their way for the most part, and especially in the second half is kind of when they broke it open. They got Ritter himself moving. I think that helped him get in rhythm more, just getting him on the run in some option plays, and then also kind of just forcing him to throw it deep with a couple of really good and creative play action plays. Like they had like kind of like a flea flicker type play where you kind of had to throw it to Matt Collins and one-on-one. So kind of giving him those easy one-on-one opportunities. I'll give Arthur Smith and them kudos there. And then like you alluded to, like I liked what the Packers offense did. And I will say this was definitely a game, obviously, that we missed Aaron Jones a bit to have his explosiveness. I think we needed that kind of short. It became evident we needed that short yard person that can, take the 3 or 4 yard dump off or screen play and make more out of it. Otherwise, it was kind of just on Jordan Love and some of the other weapons we have to push the ball deep. But once Atlanta kind of adjusted, and especially in that fourth quarter, like I mentioned, where Atlanta made most of their comeback and Green Bay had a couple of consecutive 3-and-outs, like it's just tough because Atlanta, like I said, had the ball most of the game, and I can understand why the Packers offense kind of fell out of rhythm because they were sitting on that bench for most of that second half. So, it's obviously a disappointing loss as a Packers fan, and we had opportunities to ice this game. I mentioned Ritter literally had a throw that hit Jair Alexander right in the numbers, and Jair just didn't come up with it. Would have been a pick 6, walk-in touchdown, but yeah, that's football. So, and I do want to give credit to the Atlanta defense though, because outside of a couple really good plays, I mean, for the most part, as you can see, Packers run offense was not really able to get going, and Jordan Love was their most efficient runner, and that was off scrambles, not off design runs. Definitely a game too where the Packers missed Christian Watson, maybe, as another guy to maybe take the top off the defense or take one of those short plays and, kind of create a momentum play. So, long story short, credit to the Falcons. We got falconed, basically. So we'll see what happens going forward with them. But, I'm not discouraged by the Packers' performance. It's just, there's like there can only be one winner. But so kudos to the Falcons for handling their business as they go to 2-0 and are making me look good, at least in regards to my season predictions. But now we head over to the AFC, where the Buffalo Bills finally righted the ship as they took care of the Las Vegas Raiders 38-10, just like you anticipated. As you, double check. Yeah, you picked the Bills. I picked the Raiders. Yeah.
Yep.
So the Bills bounce back game cashed through. What were your thoughts in regards to this performance?
I figured it was going to happen just because, I don't know, the Raiders, no Jacoby Myers, so it feels like they're going to be a little bit one-dimensional. I still am worried about, Josh Jacobs coming back. Like, he didn't play in preseason at all, so I'm wondering how much time it's going to take for him to ramp up. And the Bills are just a really good team. Like after the way that week 1 happened, I was assuming they were going to get their revenge. And luckily they did. Now I expected some other bounce backs to also happen, as we're going to talk about later, that did not happen. But yeah, good for Buffalo. This was a win they needed. I mean, they were heavy favorites, so it's not like this was a crazy surprising result, but I think that it's always got to feel good to go out there and just crush a team like that. So yeah, good for the Bills overall. Yeah. I don't really have many thoughts about the specifics of this game because it kind of feels like both teams did what they were expected to do.
I'm with you on Josh Jacobs. Maybe the whole contract holdout just taking him a little bit longer to get going in terms of NFL shape and such. But yeah, credit to Josh Allen, the Bills. A week after he had some really dumb choices and and throws, you can see 31 for 37, 274 yards. Obviously, being efficient but being careful with the ball and not trying to win it all in one play. And even Gabe Davis was their leading receiver, so good for him. Even though I still don't think he's really their number 2, but encouraging to see James Cook be their leading rusher. And by far, because usually it's Josh Allen is right up there, but Josh Allen only had 7 yards and on 3 carries, while James Cook, Damian Harris, we saw their stable running backs get going. I'd be very interested to see if they can keep Cook involved. And then also we've kind of been seeing a little more of Dalton Kincaid. Obviously week 1, a couple of catches and more action here in week 2. So that'd be very interesting to see because, like we mentioned, especially me, they really need a number 2. So if it'd be James Cook or Kincaid, if one of those guys can consistently be a contributor, it'll help Buffalo. But Raiders kind of Raider, Jimmy G. Yeah, a couple. I mean, I know one of those interceptions wasn't his fault, but still, making another poor choice in interception. And like you kind of alluded to, just there's a talent discrepancy right now in regards to Bills and Raiders. Raiders still building something. Bills currently in win-now mode. So not a huge shock how that one ended. Although, like I said, for me, I wish it would have been a little bit closer. But hey, good for the Bills. They took care of business. But speaking of taking care of business, let's go over to the an AFC matchup in the AFC North. And it was between the Bengals and Ravens, as the Ravens win here 27-24. The Bengals fall to 0-2. Joe Burrow may have aggravated his calf injury. Sky seems to be falling right now. Not really, but there seems to be a little bit of pressure building in Cincinnati. But what were your thoughts on this result, John?
I'll say this off the start. The Bengals were 0-2 to start last season as well. So once I heard that, and I remembered it too last year, I'm not super worried. The upcoming schedule, too, is very favorable for them to bounce back. They play the Rams, who have actually been pretty feisty, so you can't sleep on the Rams. But at least talent-wise, you're not having to go against like a crazy team, although they do have some people who are doing really well right now, like Puka, like Kyron Williams, all those guys. Then you play the Titans, who, once again, not the easiest of outs, but you can beat them through the air. We've seen that so far, and that could be a good game for Joe Burrow. Then you got the Cardinals and Seattle, who's kind of been struggling. So at least the next 4 games, like these are all winnable games that the Bengals should be favored in. So you have some room for some bounce backs before you get into the meat of the season where they got to go play the Niners and Bills back to back. But anyway, they'll be fine. I'm still a little disappointed in how slow the Bengals offense has been. Joe Mixon hasn't really been able to get a ton on the ground. I mean, he wasn't terrible. He had 59 yards on 13 carries. So like it's all right in terms of efficiency, but just I don't know. Their overall run game, they got not even 70 total rushing yards, so it feels like they could commit to the run a little bit more. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins have yet to like really pop at the same time. T. Higgins had a pretty good game here, but last game nobody had any good games. So you're still kind of waiting to see when Jamar is going to really blow up, because we know he's capable of those like 150-yard, 2-touchdown kind of performances. And who knows, maybe that's going to be next week. But overall, like I said, I'm not panicking for the Bengals. I think that the Ravens just had a really good outing. I mean, you think of Lamar and him throwing 237 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then on the ground, they had like 160-something yards rushing. I don't know. It just feels like the Ravens finally healthy. Maybe they're kind of getting stuff going. They're 2-0 at this point. The Ravens have always been a good team. It's like I do think that maybe people kind of forget how good the Ravens were when they were actually healthy over the last handful of years, just because they've been dealing with so many injuries. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about it. That said, for the Bengals on defense, I would be a little bit worried. They allowed the Ravens to convert 9 of 14 third downs. So the Ravens were kind of able to get whatever they wanted on third down. The Ravens ran 70 total plays. The Bengals defense did not get a single sack, which is obviously tough when you're playing Lamar. But yeah, just watching that game too, it just didn't seem like they were able to get a ton of pressure. I don't know. It feels like the Bengals defense needs to step up a little bit more here and at least on the defensive line kind of exert their will, which once again, I know it's going to be tough when you're playing Lamar just because of how mobile he is. But yeah, I think if the defensive line can get back to doing what they've been kind of known for with Hendrickson and all those guys, and the offense can finally start cooking, I think the Bengals will be fine.
So yeah, I'm not necessarily hitting the panic button on the Bengals either. Like you mentioned, we've seen this before, and they do have a favorable schedule coming up. Although, like I said, be interesting to monitor that calf injury for Burrow. Will it keep him out Monday? Who knows? Because obviously, no Burrow, no chance. At least, sorry, Jake Browning. Like,
right, I agree.
It's just a factor of the matter of fact there. But in regards to Baltimore, like you mentioned, yeah, like people don't remember, like last year Lamar was a leading MVP candidate, and then he got hurt, and then that's kind of when it all started. I mean, they had other injuries, but it all kind of started snowballing towards the contract drama towards the end of the year. But yeah, I got to give the Ravens pass game at least a little bit credit here. We've seen Zay Flowers be involved within the first 2 weeks, but we saw a little bit more of Odell, and then Odell gets hurt. So, but doesn't matter. Not saying he doesn't matter, but doesn't matter because then Nelson Aguilar steps in, has a pretty good game. Mark Andrews, he wasn't there week 1, so comes back week 2, has obviously a really good game. They still have Rashad Bateman and Isaiah Likely, and like still involving Devin Duvernay. And although their run game too, was better this game, and obviously sucks that they really lost J.K. Dobbins, but in typical Ravens fashion, still have Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, who can kind of fill in for what, into their different roles. Obviously, Gus Edwards more of the thumper, Justice Hill, in theory, more of the pass catching, speedster. So, yeah, it was good to see the Ravens be versatile in that way, and hopefully it can continue. And yeah, you're kind of right, hit everything for the Bengals, and you mentioned the secondary for them too, or at least in regards to their pass defense. Like we've mentioned, lost a couple, lost both their safeties, starting safeties over the offseason, kind of dealing with some young pieces at corner. So not too surprising that they're kind of struggling here on both sides of the ball to begin the season. So we'll see if they can right the ship going forward. And especially in regards to that offensive line, hopefully they can start gelling, as they did release La'el Collins right before this game, right? Or it was like a day before this game.
Which was surprising.
I thought they would at least be like, well, he's been disappointing, but let's just keep him around. So maybe he can bounce back. It's just they gave him a pretty good contract, or not pretty good, but they gave him like a multi-year contract. Was it 2 years ago, right, when they signed him? So
yeah.
We'll see what happens with him, and if they can get that line straightened out, and if they can just get their offense straightened out, basically. So we'll see. But Ravens get a crucial win. As for the Bengals, really tough loss, as not only are you 0-2, but you've lost 2 divisional games. So this could be a game that kind of bites them in the butt come December, come January, if they need, some help getting into the playoffs. So we'll see what happens for both those squads going forward. But obviously a good matchup there. Now let's go back to the NFC, where this was a rematch of last year, which I failed to remember. But apparently that was a good game. This one was pretty good between the Seahawks and Lions for this little rematch, as this one went to overtime. And the Seahawks, they get their first win, 37-31. I don't know if you saw the whole Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He was telling the Detroit fans to wear the blue ski masks. Apparently sold out. On Amazon too. But unfortunately for CJ Gardner-Johnson, which he also got hurt this game, not only did they lose, but then the Seahawks, I'm sure you saw that, they took the masks back. So what were your thoughts here on the Seahawks overtime win?
Good win. They showed resilience here. The fact that their offense and defense, because the defense got involved with that. Gosh, was late pick six, right? It was in the fourth quarter. When was it? Yeah, it was. Trey Brown, 40-yard interception return, which apparently Jared Goff was like 20 passes away from breaking some record in terms of
passes without an interception.
Consecutive passes.
I think it was like Rodgers was one, and I think Brady was like 2, I want to say. I know Rodgers was 1 because he was, prime Rodgers was that guy.
Yeah. And so, I mean, sucks for Jared Goff, especially considering how crucial of an interception return that was. But yeah, I mean, good for Seattle to stay resilient here, because not only were they able to come back from, that deficit and eventually take the lead, but then when Detroit ties it up and things kind of start to get dicey, then Seattle still responds going into overtime and is able to get the win. I know some people were already tweeting about the overtime rules and how they want it to be addressed because both teams deserve to get a chance to touch the ball, and I agree. I know that they changed it for the playoffs, but people are already talking about doing it for the regular season too. I don't really know why they haven't yet. But other than that, I mean, I'm not really concerned for either team. A lot of offense to be played. We kind of figured that both of them were going to be more offensive-oriented teams just because defensively they don't have the most talent. But regardless, just good win for Seattle. And for Detroit, I think this is kind of how their season's going to be honest. I don't expect them to be winning a lot of tight games, if you will.
I mean, obviously, a concern for us was their defense. It wasn't really shown week 1, but I think as we've seen, this Chiefs team still kind of finding their way, and they had no Travis Kelce, and I know that kind of upset Detroit fans when Mike Tirico kind of said there's an asterisk next to that win. I'm not going to put an asterisk, but I think we saw that this weekend against a fully healthy Seahawks, that this Detroit defense still has, like you mentioned, still has work to do in regards to getting guys and getting, working on that side of the ball and talent-wise. And I will give them the credit, didn't really let the Seattle run game get going, but on the flip side, the pass game was, Geno was torching them. And even with DK leaving for a bit of this game, they still kind of had their way that in the passing game. But it just sucks because I did want to applaud Jared Goff. He's had a pretty good, that's that you mentioned was like shows he's had a pretty good run, and he's been pushing the ball down the field. Josh Reynolds with 2 touchdowns this game, and Amon-Ra St. Brown still doing him. And it'll be interesting though going forward because not only he threw the pick 6, but then also David Montgomery fumbled at one point. So just these, especially at the beginning of the half too, when that kind of helped Seattle get back in the game because he fumbled like on the first play from scrimmage, and then Seattle only had to go 20 yards, and all of a sudden now it's 14-all and we're back in this game. So, but yeah, it was definitely a seesaw affair, like you said. So credit to both teams really, but especially Seattle because late, Detroit gets the field goal to tie it at the end. Sometimes that can bleed in overtime. And you mentioned the overtime thing, like. I am with you. I wish they would both sides would get the ball, but I do see the other side of the argument of why they may not introduce it in a regular season, which is maybe because they don't want these overtime games going too long and affecting health and such. But I don't know if you're concerned about that. Implement like college rule or something. I don't know. That's for the people who get.
Also, I mean, if they're worried about that, then why are they adding games to the season? Like we had a 16-game season, they made it 17. There's rumors that they want to go to 18, and so I don't think they care about that. If they say that, they're just it's the whole virtue signaling stuff where they don't really care about that.
In my humble opinion, I think they don't want to waste the time on that. Like you said, I think they want to push the efforts for more games so that these owners can get more money in their pockets. So,
oh yeah. Like to them, the overtime doesn't get them anything, right? Like the game going longer, they don't get more like money from a TV deal. You don't get more ticket sales. So like they just want the game to be over. So I think that's why.
Gotta get that extra 12 minutes of concessions. Just kidding. No, that should not be a tipping point for them. But nonetheless, good win for the Seahawks. They needed it. They go to 1-1 Detroit. As Dan Campbell said after that post game, they got a little bit of humble pie. So I'm sure they will bounce back with Dan Campbell at the helm. So both teams go to 1-1. Ironic too, because these two teams. Remember, it was I think the Seahawks got in over the Lions due to tiebreakers last playoff. So who knows? Maybe this win will be big for them then. But nonetheless, let's keep on going. Go into a game where the result here was definitely surprising. Another overtime as the Tennessee Titans. Yes, the Tennessee Titans. They win 27-24. We saw the other Ryan Tannehill, the one that takes care of the ball this week, as let me double check. Pretty sure he did avoid any interceptions as opposed to last week. Yes, so turnover-free week for Ryan Tannehill, and another disappointing loss for the Chargers. What are your thoughts here?
The good old Chargers, man. I did watch quite a bit of this game because I had both Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert in quite a few fantasy leagues. I'm kind of done with Brandon Staley, to be honest.
A lot of Chargers fans, a lot of people.
I know a lot of people have. Yeah, I know Chargers fans have been off him for a while. I feel like I gave him more of a chance than most, but they've allowed 63 points through 2 games. I don't know where that ranks in the overall NFL. Like, I know the Giants have allowed more because there was 40-0 and 28 or whatever they allowed this week. So they allowed 68. But yeah, we'll get to them later. But okay, hold on. Points allowed. Let me look at this. I know they've allowed the most. They've allowed the most in the AFC, and the Giants have allowed more. The Bears have allowed more. That's it. Literally, the Giants and the Bears have allowed more points than the Chargers defense. And this is a defense, when you're comparing it to the Giants, which the Giants is also a little unfair because that wasn't all actual points allowed that their defense allowed, because there was the defensive touchdown that Dallas got, right? Or no, special teams. There was special teams touchdown. So basically, if you take that out, it's literally only the Chicago Bears. And if you look at the units that these two teams have, there's just no way that a defensive unit with J.C. Jackson, Asante Samuel Jr., Derwin James, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, like the amount of talent they have on this defense, and they're, as of right now, the second worst defense in the NFL in terms of points allowed, is absurd to me. Like, that's just crazy. Your head coach is also a defensive-minded coach. Absolutely unacceptable. I know that they played the Dolphins and the Titans, and it's 2 weeks, so like sample size is obvious. I don't expect them to be the second worst points allowed defense in the entire NFL this whole year, but it's just crazy to me that this unit has that much talent and they just can't figure it out. It's been years, and of course, the reason I get frustrated too is because instantly everybody starts talking about Justin Herbert. And he does deserve some criticism. The offense does overall, because their final 4 drives went punt, field goal, punt. So to end the game, I mean, they certainly had more opportunities to put up more points, because also at this point, when they had that first drive, they were up 21-17. They punt, then they get the ball back, 21-17 still. They punt again. Then the Chargers the Titans get a touchdown. Herbert leads a field goal drive. It's tied. Then they get the ball back and they punt in overtime. So, so there is some criticism that has to go the offense's way, but overall, when you've scored 34 and now 24 points, your quarterback has not thrown any interceptions. He's thrown for like 600 total yards, 2 touchdowns. Your run game the first week had like 200, 300 rushing yards. You didn't get anything on the ground this week, which is unfortunate, but the Titans have a really good run defense. I don't know. I just feel like their offense is moving the ball well, and they're still losing these games. It like I said, I don't mean to go on such a long rant, but I'm out on Brandon Staley because it's just kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, I'm kind of wanting to trend that way. I'm still kind of holding out hope, but I do agree with the baseline that there's too much talent on this team for this defense to be this poor, especially against the Titans. Like, okay, I will give a little bit of a pass. Week 1, Miami came out ready, and they had some,
Sure.
But the Titans, like, we know it's Derrick Henry, and he didn't have an amazing game. I mean, 25 for 80 wasn't entirely efficient, but yeah, the fact that the past game, and I know Tannehill got sacked 5 times, but nonetheless, 20 for 24, like, it's hard to beat. I didn't watch much of this game, but it just seemed like, just looking at these numbers, that Tannehill did not have any issues in regards to reading the field and finding guys open, besides the fact he got sacked. So, and like we mentioned before, I mean, it was a hobbled DeAndre Hopkins, who literally was a game time decision, didn't practice all week. And, Traylon Burks only had, 3 for 76, and then, Chris Moore was their second leading receiver in terms of yards. He only had 1 catch. So Yes, it's mind-boggling to say the least as to why the Chargers, especially their defense, has been so poor. Yeah, I don't know how long the leash they'll give Brandon Staley, but like we mentioned before the season, like it's playoff or bust. It seems like for Brandon Staley, and even then, it seems like he kind of has to get to at least get a playoff win under his belt to kind of save his job. And it's not going on, not looking great. Start off, even though, like you said, the offense looking really good, and hopefully maybe they need to incorporate Quentin Johnston more to I don't know what the solve really is here. And like you said, I really can't blame the offense technically because they've kind of done their job for the most part and really haven't turned the ball over. Like you said, even I'm trying like no fumbles this game. They just got beat.
Yeah,
like plain out. It's just odd. So luckily for the Chargers, AFC, like their division, we'll talk about some of them later, but only technically one game behind some of the rest in their division, even though they're 0-2. So they can still right the ship, but definitely something to keep an eye on going forward is their defense. And, and I don't know if you saw or heard any of the press conference afterwards, but Staley did. He was already sounding like he was a guy on the hot seat because I think someone asked him like, "Oh, has the 0-2 start resulted from the loss against Jacksonville in the playoffs?" And obviously he gave the right answer. He's like, "No, it doesn't. Different season." But he was definitely a little panicked when giving that answer. I felt like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a results based business, and the reason too that I'm looking so heavily on the defense for Staley specifically is because he's a defensive guy. Like if he was an offensive guy, then I'd maybe cut him some slack and start talking about who the defensive coordinator is. But I don't know. Like you were brought in to a team that already had a lot of offensive talent. The offense has, for the most part, been able to do its thing. Like even it's unfortunate that like the offense too kind of in some of these high scoring games doesn't like continue to put the foot on the gas pedal, because I think back to that Jaguars loss, they scored like 30 points. So when you score 30 points just on paper, you've done your job. But like 28 of that was in the first half, I think, or maybe I don't know the exact number. Most of that was in the first half. And then they got shut down in the second half. So then people are going to say, well, that's partially on the offense, which I agree. But it's every time I'm looking at these crucial losses for the Chargers, it's like, man, like you can't get like a defense that like holds them to 21-17, like something lower where your offense doesn't have to be perfect all day, because that's kind of how it feels with a lot of these games is everybody's expecting the offense to be perfect when you see some of these other teams and quarterbacks and the QB gets praised because although they were bad the whole game, they came out and they led them to the game-winning drive in a 17-14 game. And I don't know. I kind of feel bad for that Chargers offense and everybody involved because they just can't make mistakes with the way the defense plays in a lot of these big games. I mean, think back to even 2 years ago when they missed that game where they could have tied the Raiders and they both could have made the playoffs. Josh Jacobs got whatever he wanted, Yeah,
that's... maybe the Chargers are cursed. I feel like, and I should have done better homework because
they might be.
Even back to Phillip Rivers years, but especially like the past like decade, it just feels like they never have gotten off to a good start. Whether it be, remember a couple of years, there was like special teams was an issue. They first had Young Wei Koo, and unfortunately he like missed some key kicks like the first few weeks. And then I remember another year that happened because they had the Money Badger, Michael Badge, terrible name if you're going to miss your kicks, Michael. I don't think that's why he's in the league. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe they're cursed because they left San Diego with no clue. But nonetheless, they got to figure it out, or Staley's got to figure it out, or else he's going to be looking for a different place to work, essentially. And I'm not trying to say that it's not a personal thing, just kind of a factual thing, like we're saying. So we'll see if the Chargers can right the ship, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as they're 2-0 somehow, and they win Week 2 over the Bears 27-17. Speaking of people on the hot seat or under fire, Justin Fields under a little bit, and the Bears are under fire after this poor start. But what were your thoughts in regards to this game, John?
I don't have a ton of them. The Bears just aren't a good football team. Some people maybe expected them to take a little bit of a step forward. I still felt like they were a year or two away of building before I could really start consider them true, like, potential competing for the playoffs, and clearly they're not quite there. I would like to see them maybe, because a lot of people were blaming Justin Fields, and although he did not have a good game, when I tuned into this game, I was just really shocked that like they don't do designed runs for him, which is really confusing. Like Anthony Richardson is balling out in Indianapolis, and that's because they let him run the ball. Like Jalen Hurts, they let him run the ball. Like Lamar Jackson gets to run the ball, and obviously Fields can scramble, but I just don't get why they're not like intentionally running the ball with him, because the run game worked against the Buccaneers, which I don't know why they didn't commit to it more. Like Khalil Herbert only ran 7 times for 35 yards. That's 5 yards a carry. That's very successful. Like averaging that over a game is an elite number. And his longest run was 8 yards too. So it wasn't like he had one big run, which did happen for Roschon Johnson. He had 4 carries for 32, 29 of it came on one play. But even that, like a 29-yard run, like it just shows that like the run game was working, and yet the Bears didn't really run the ball. So I don't know. This was kind of the thing that we ran into last year with the Bears early on, is like just let Justin Fields run, and good things will happen. I'm not saying the Bears are going to become like an amazing team, but yeah, I'm kind of confused at the general offensive game plan here. I know you traded for Claypool and DJ Moore, but let's use what we're good at. And with Justin Fields at quarterback and the running backs you have, I think that means it's time to run. So, yeah. Other than that, I don't really have a ton of other thoughts. I mean, good for the Buccaneers being a 2-0. I don't expect it to continue on the season. Who did they play last week? It was they
played the Vikings.
The Vikings
2-0 against the NFC North.
The Bears, I don't think are a good team, and the Vikings, you know how I feel about them. So, I'm pretty sure did I pick Tampa or did you pick Tampa? Did either of us pick Tampa?
I did not pick. I picked Atlanta as the only representative from the NFC South.
Okay. I can't remember if either of us picked Tampa last week.
I think you talked. I think we. Oh, in regards to actually picking, I picked Tampa last week.
Yeah. So I don't know what I did.
We both picked Tampa last week.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so it was us. It's just this week you went with Chicago, and unfortunately it bit you in the butt.
Yeah. Regardless, the point being, I think both of us could agree that like Chicago's not a great team. I wasn't super confident in Tampa being a great team either. They're a better team than Chicago as they shown. And then and clearly neither of us had faith in Minnesota week 1. So I don't know if I'm fully on board that like Tampa's good, but we'll see. I mean, Chris Godwin had a good week 1. Mike Evans had a good week 2. I will say about Baker Mayfield, like he's doing what he needs to do. He's not doing anything crazy. I mean, he had 300 yards, so he's getting the ball to his playmakers and he's letting them make plays. So that at the very least, you'll love to see that.
And let me double check last week. I don't think, like we talk about turnovers, it's kind of been a bugaboo sometimes for Baker. I'm just double checking the box score. I don't think he threw an interception last week.
This week he had 0 as well. And in fact, he didn't even have fumble, but he did recover one. So good for Baker.
Yeah. And only 1 sack throughout the first 2 weeks. Now, granted, like you mentioned, Bears defense, I think people kind of oversaw the fact that this isn't a very good defense, still not very talented, or at least very young. They have Brisker and Jalen Johnson. I know they signed Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards, but Edwards, like both, middle line, they still need something up front, and they don't have anything special in the secondary, at least as of yet. So, and then I don't know the fix for the Bears offense. But I'm with you. Like, at least looking at the numbers, let's try to run Justin Fields more.
It didn't lead to wins last year, but at least they were moving the ball when they did that. Yes.
And and I hate this because there's going to be people that say, oh, well, they're trying to protect him, but you drafted Justin Fields. One of the reasons why you drafted him is because he's a great runner. It's like the whole, I don't know if you remember like it's happened for a couple mobile quarterbacks like Cam Newton and such for like year 2 or 3 or something. They're like, oh yeah, we want to focus on Cam, we want to protect Cam and stuff. But it's like, well, you drafted him because he can run.
Yeah,
so
don't
like,
make him
yes, I
something
understand it comes
he's
with risk. Yeah, like I understand the risk, like he may get injured, but come on, like it's a special skill.
Yeah,
like it's kind of you gotta find the fine line in regards to still using that skill and not running him to the ground. Like
you didn't draft him thinking he was gonna be like Tom Brady,
pocket drop back passer,
Manning, like
dice people up with his arm.
Yeah, like he's a runner. Let him run and like hope, and the passing will come along with it. Because I do think that like certain quarterbacks, they talk about like getting your confidence with like 1 or 2 passes and all that kind of stuff. If you're a running quarterback, getting a big run, I feel like is a boost for your confidence. Like, let the guy run. I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, and then once you get the running game going, like we see with teams that play against Lamar, it's just a challenge when you play against a mobile quarterback. Is then you have to kind of simplify. You can't run these crazy blitzes, or you have to kind of simplify your defenses because we have to contain him. We don't want to send a blitz, and then we send the blitz the wrong way, and boom, he has 20, 30 free yards. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Chicago. But in regards to the Bucs, I mean, I expect their defense to bounce back, and they think they've shown that. And also, like, maybe this is a little bit of a cop-out for the Bears, but, Bucs, we know they have a solid run defense. They're not as dominant as maybe it was a couple of years ago, but still really good. Still have some of the same core pieces, and Vita Vea and Shaquille Barrett, which kudos to him. He coming back from his injury and the things he's been dealing with off the field. He had that pick six, too. That was kind of unfortunate for Justin Fields too. Like, it comes up on him, but it's just a great play by Shaquille Barrett, or Shaq Barrett. And then, you mentioned the Bucs offense is just doing good enough to keep the ball moving. And credit Baker for getting the ball, being able to be aggressive, find when he can be aggressive, and get the ball to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Rachaad White. A little bit of a bounce back week for him too in the run game, because the run game was non-existent the week before, but this week a little bit better. So obviously we'll see if the Bucs are for real going forward, but good start for them. Obviously it's best you can get. And for the Bears, let's see if they can turn the ship around on the offense, because I've already seen like Stephen A. Smith. I know he's not an expert, but obviously on ESPN, big name. I will say he's actually called out the Bears coaching staff as he's not going after Justin Fields, but I have seen other people, like you mentioned, John. There's some people that are going after Fields saying it's his fault, and so we'll see if they can sort out this kind of the offense stalling this first few weeks like they did last year. So we'll see what happens there. Now let's go over, staying in the state of Florida, to the Jacksonville game, where the Jaguars, unfortunately, were lost to the Kansas City Chiefs 17-9. It was a surprising defensive game that I don't think many people, I didn't expect it to be this defensive, but nonetheless, that's what it was. It was a Chris Jones return, although he was on a snap count, was all over the place, as we saw, as the scoreline indicates. Chiefs took care of business and got a crucial win here for the Jags. Obviously, some were hoping that they would have a better performance. I am seeing here, apparently this is their third loss to Kansas City in 10 months, so that's tough. But what are your thoughts in regards to this result?
Yeah, Jaguars' offense was kind of unfortunate. I follow this one fantasy football account on Instagram, and they just do this fun little thing every week of like missed points based on a penalty called it back, or your foot was just slightly out of bounds, stuff like that. And both Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley missed out on a lot of fantasy points, and obviously that indicates to certain production, specifically in the end zone. I didn't really watch any of this game because, like I said, I was watching Red Zone, this was still during the morning game. So I was watching Red Zone, and because it was low scoring, there was not a lot of coverage of this game. But yeah, it just seems like it was kind of an unfortunate offensive day for the Jags. I mean, they moved the ball somewhat decently. Lawrence, he wasn't super efficient, I will say. And maybe that's a shout out to the Chiefs defense, because at least through 2 weeks, their defense has been kind of impressive. I will say that. Like, they've been more, it's crazy to say this, but they've been more of a defensive oriented team so far. So good on the Chiefs, because if they can get the offense back and moving, then they're going to be a scary team. But offensively for the Chiefs, you get Travis Kelce back. That's always nice. And I think that him coming back just kind of puts everybody back in their rightful spots. And you see guys like Sky Moore, Justin Watson, Noah Gray, just Kadarius Toney, a lot of people getting involved in classic Mahomes fashion. Pacheco had success on the ground in this game. Overall, I'm not taking too much away from either team for this game, just because I think both of these teams are capable of a lot more. And if they were to rematch again, I'm expecting them to produce a lot more. So yeah, unfortunate game overall for the Jags. It's how it goes sometimes, though.
Yeah, for the Chiefs, obviously got the win. I'd like to see them be a little more patient. It's always been a concern or a bugaboo of mine. Andy Reid, be a little more patient with the run game. Like you said, Pacheco had a really good game. Like, can you let him, ride him per se for, a drive or two? And maybe, I just wish they would kind of give him more touches on the ground. Nonetheless, it was good to see Tony bounce back. Like we mentioned last week, he had a very tough week on and off the field in regards to, people memeing him. But he bounced back, and obviously good to see Kelsey get through this game, obviously produce and just stay healthy so they can, I think like you alluded to, I'm not too concerned about the lack of offensive production for the Chiefs offense. And I expect them to kind of figure it out, kind of like they did last year. Granted, they don't they still have a bunch of newer pieces. Like even the Sky Moore, he had 3 for 70 on a touchdown, and that touchdown was really it was an off script play. So it wasn't, just him beating his guy on his normal route. So maybe a little bit of concern there. And obviously Tony, I think he did get hurt at the end of this game. So that's a concern as has always kind of been with his career. But like we said at the beginning of the season, as long as the main three are there, Kelsey, Mahomes, Chris Jones, they're going to be in this conversation in January. So, good to see Jones back. Very interesting to see. I know this is previewing ahead. I'm just very interested to see. I haven't heard any details, but Mahomes got his contract restructured. Does that mean they're anticipating maybe trying to re-sign Chris Jones, or was they also maybe anticipating to let him go and then fill in that spot? Very interesting to see in the offseason, but that's a talk for March, April. Nonetheless, tough, like you mentioned, for the Jaguars, but kind of little brother, big brother syndrome. Still got to beat Big Brother in the Chiefs to kind of prove that you're for real.
Right.
Had an opportunity, didn't do so. But they're still a young team. And last point, too, their offensive line, too. It was a concern going into this season. We mentioned them losing both their tackles when due to suspension and such. And then, Jawan Taylor leaving free agency. So that's obviously became an issue this game, as not really effective running the ball in the traditional sense. ETN only 12 for 40, and Lawrence sacked 4 times. And even outside of the sacks, saw a lot of Chris Jones and other Chiefs players, but especially Chris Jones, wrecking plays and just kind of making life real tough, to say the least, on Trevor Lawrence in the passing game. So
I will add for the Jaguars too, although I am heavily invested in ETN and for fantasy purposes, I don't want this to happen. I do think that there's something to be said about getting other running backs involved. Dearness Johnson had 1 carry for 8 yards. I don't know. That feels like a successful carry to me. Like maybe let him get another one. He also had 1 catch for 9 yards. Like, I don't know. Just if a guy's having success, maybe it's his day and it's not ETN's. So I kind of would like to see a little more versatility there, because in terms of rushing the ball, ETN had 12, Lawrence had 5, Dearness Johnson had 1, Tank Bigsby had 0. So I don't know. Just I feel like sometimes you can kind of just ride the hot hand, maybe see who's seeing the field a little bit better. So
yeah, and that also Doug Peterson, head coach of the Jaguars. You mentioned that. Guess what tree he comes from? The Andy Reid tree. Right. So I'm with you. I think for Peterson, diversify the run game. Like you mentioned, we'll see if they reincorporate Bigsby. Andy Reid, just be more patient with the run, please. Obviously, like I said, we'll be talking more about these teams as the season goes on, as we expect them both to be playing in January and February, or at least January. So now let's go to 2 teams that we don't expect to be talking about in January and or February. And that is the Colts versus the Texans. And the Colts are the ones that get their first win of the season, as the Texans unfortunately fall to 0-2. Richardson technically gets the win, Anthony Richardson, was involved in the win, but he did leave this game with a concussion. So bittersweet victory for the Indianapolis Colts, as you would like to see him finish out that game. Nonetheless, Gardner Minshew came in, filled in quite well, as the Colts get the win over the Texans. What were your thoughts here in this battle of rookie quarterbacks?
Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud looked impressive, I will say. And I'm somewhat surprised by that. I did not think that Stroud would have as hot a start as he has, despite the fact that I thought he was the best quarterback in the draft. But, I mean, the guy came out 384 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, no turnovers. He lost a fumble, actually. And he did fumble twice. He recovered one. But I don't know, just like I'm a little more impressed out of what I've seen than I actually initially thought I was going to be. I thought maybe just because of the lack of weapons on the outside that it would be somewhat of concern. Now, they did play the Colts, so I'm not going to take this as, oh my gosh, CJ Stroud is, way better than expected immediately, because I don't know. I don't know if the Colts might have the worst secondary in the NFL, is all I'll say. I could be wrong on that. I'm waiting to see, but at least through 2 weeks, I have not been impressed with what I've seen the Colts secondary do. But regardless, overall, CJ Stroud in a second career game, throwing for almost 400 yards and 2 touchdowns and no picks, that's a win for him, especially considering they had basically no run game. Like, the run game did not help them out whatsoever. 26 carries for 52 yards, literally averaging 2 yards a carry is terrible. And talking about diversifying the run, that includes Pierce, Singletary, Agbonwale. Like, they tried multiple runners and it just nobody worked. And then on the other side, which also shout out to Nico Collins because he had a really freaking great day. And Stroud really diversified who he was throwing it to. I mean, you throw for 400 yards, you're going to get a lot of people, but you see Tank Dell, Robert Woods, and Nico Collins all have over 70 yards. That's cool to see. But for Anthony Richardson, I mean, the guy, he's looked really strong. Like I said earlier about the Bears, I'm loving how they're actually giving him designed runs. They're not forcing him into being something he's not good at. 19 to 23, only for 171 yards, but I think that just goes to show that, that was Gardner Minshew, because Anthony Richardson did get hurt. He was 6 of 10 for 56 yards, and then he had the 35 on the ground. So, like, he was good when he played, and then when Minshew came in, he handled his business, and I like Minshew, so I'm a Minshew guy, I guess. Overall, they didn't have anything crazy in terms of offensive production, like any individual guy that really popped, but it just seemed like across the board, like everybody kind of just did their job. So, for Anthony Richardson, I don't know the status of his injury. I'm hoping he's good because he had a really fun start to his career. But yeah, other than that, I mean, these are two teams that we expect to be really bad, and one of them was 1-1, the other one's 0-2. So I'm not super shocked by the results. But I think, promising players on both sides.
Yeah, I really have nothing else to add except for important to note for Stroud. Hopefully he can stay alive because he got sacked 6 times and they're already missing 4 of their 5 starting linemen. Yeah. So hopefully he can just survive until that line gets back. Otherwise, I don't want to say the name, but you don't want to David Carr him. And, but yes, you took the words out of my mouth. I have nothing else to add. Impressive performances we've seen from both those 2 rookies. Shame Richardson couldn't finish. But that's why you have Minshew, who knows the system with Shane Steichen. And yeah, like I mentioned, this offense, even with Zach Moss, who was kind of considered lost, I would consider him bad stock at this point. He had an actually productive day. It was the Zach Moss day that we were all waiting for in Buffalo. So he had a good performance here. So we'll see what the future holds for both these quarterbacks and how they progress throughout the rest of the season. But good win for the Colts. And CJ Stroud still searching for his first one. Hopefully he gets it soon here this season. But anyway, that concludes at least the early games. Let's go over to the afternoon games, starting with one that was oddly exciting, although it usually is, but nonetheless, the 49ers, they were in a close one and managed to force a couple late turnovers to beat the LA Rams 30-23. What were your thoughts here in regards to this West Coast showdown?
I mean, the Niners, they take care of business, but the Rams are looking good. We talked about it during the game where I was like, are the Rams good? Like, what's going on here? Because they win week 1 and they were competitive in this game. There was I can't remember what the score was early, but I think halftime it was tied, right? They were in there.
17-all.
Yeah, and so they were in there. And so shout out the Rams because they were looking good. Unfortunately, towards the end of the game, the turnovers kind of happened. Matthew Stafford starts to force things a little bit more because they were trying to get back into it. So that's kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. And, overall, I would say the fact that the Rams are sitting at 1-1 and they only lost the Niners by a touchdown, which, by the way, McVay... He pissed off a lot of people in Vegas kicking that field goal 4 seconds. Yep. Yeah, because that covered right there for a lot of people, at least on our line, the Rams covered. And Yeah, so a lot of people were very upset by that field goal. And also, I think it hit the over, too, with, I could be wrong on that, but regardless, I'm sure somebody it hit the over and somebody it covered, and they're very upset. But shout out to the Rams, because I do think that they're looking a little bit better than they were previously. I'm very interested to see why Cam Akers is basically dead to Sean McVay. Like, the guy was a healthy scratch, I'm pretty sure. And they're talking about trading him all of a sudden, which happened last year, and nobody wanted him, and so it didn't happen. And you know how I feel about running backs off the Achilles injury, so I'm not super surprised. But I mean, Kyren Williams, in terms of like profiles, is not the most like he's short and he's slow, so and he's like small. So in terms of profile, he's not like the most impressive running back that you would think like, oh, that's definitely going to be like that's why they replaced him. But he's been pretty good so far, so I'm not going to knock him. Like, he's been productive. But I can't talk about this game without talking about Puka Nacua, because he's a stud. Like, I had heard rumblings about him in terms of like being a deep fantasy sleeper, but so far he's a freaking stud. So shout out to the Rams. I'll let you talk about the Niners, because I didn't really watch a ton of the second half specifically. But yeah, the Rams were impressive in that first half. Or just the game as a whole.
Regardless of the whole game, wasn't Brock Purdy. Like, Brock Purdy, this game could have been a lot. The Niners could have beat the Rams by another score or two. You know, Brock Purdy missed a couple of plays. But it's going to happen. And yeah, like regardless of the Niners, I mean, they just typical Niners, they were able to run the ball with great efficiency against the Rams. We kind of expected that. But it was honestly the flip side, because I thought the Niners, this was a perfect matchup for the Niners defense against the Rams. Okay, we know Stafford's they have no real deep threats outside of Tutu Atwell, and even then, he's not like an amazing deep threat. So how long can you just, pitch and catch for 7-8 yards, basically? But credit Stafford and them. I know I'm supposed to talk more Niners, but because Stafford really and I should know of all people, because I put him in pretty sure I put him pretty high in my top 10 if I remember. But
yeah,
I mean, I was very worried about the elbow injury coming to this season, but it looks like it's not really an issue. Now, granted, like I said, their passing game right now is he just really it's 1-2. He's got to get the ball out quickly. Mm-hmm. And credit to Puka Nacua, because he kind of fits that, where Puka Nacua is not going to be an intermediate to deep range threat, but he has good size, good agility, and is very good at seemingly to read coverages, find the holes, to kind of sit in or to play the leverage. I really wonder. And you were out of the country. I think when this came out, did you hear about the report from like Stafford's wife that like he wasn't connecting with the young guys right before the season started?
I did hear that report. And
I wonder if that was like intentional to throw everyone off, because it seems like he's got a connection with Puka. I'm just saying, obviously, like they have a really good connection. And they've only been working with each other a short time. So I feel like that was like, I don't know.
The reports out of the Rams are always funny, because you think back to when Stafford first shows up. Me and Dogger, we keep making the jokes about the breakfast, because the reports for Kupp and Stafford are having breakfast every morning, and we're like, oh. And so I bought into the Kupp thing. I was already high in Kupp anyway, but like once I saw that, I was like, I'm gonna draft him in every fantasy league I can. And so then we get the opposite reports of, oh, he's not messing with the young guys, and
he doesn't know how to connect. They're all on their phones, apparently, was the issue.
Yeah, and yet here we are. Puka Nacua is going crazy, and Stafford really likes him. So I don't know.
And Tutu Atwell. Like, Tutu Atwell's been pretty productive for them too.
True,
I was skeptical after week 1, and you mentioned Kyren Williams. So like the Rams, I don't think they'll be a playoff team.
Yeah, no.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see though if. Obviously, the Cooper Kupp situation's a important one to monitor, because if he comes back and if they can find a way to make things work with him and Nacua and Atwell, and if Kyren keeps playing well, like this Rams team may be just a thorn on the people's side, and it'll be very interesting to see what they do if they can, add more in the offseason. But nonetheless, Niners, obviously the better team. They won. They took care of business, and it's just great to see a fully healthy Niners team. I'm going to knock on wood, though, before I inevitably curse them, because that just seems to be the only issue, is can they be healthy come January, playoff time. So they handled their business. They get the win here, but the Rams giving people a lot to think about going forward. especially me after I learned my lesson in week 1 when they killed me and the Seahawks. But nonetheless, let's go over to one of their division rivals who won't be in the conversation come January, and that's the Cardinals. As the Cardinals almost put the Giants on notice in regards to being one of the worst teams in the league. We were talking about that in our group chat Sunday. But the Giants rally back. They were at 1 point down 20-0. Came back, won this game 31-28. All the points in the second half. Speaking of bittersweet, they did lose Saquon at the end of this one. But nonetheless, they do get the win. What were your thoughts in regards to your division rival Giants escaping Arizona with the win?
You know, seeing the end result of this game, and I don't mean to make light of Saquon getting hurt, but it feels like, you know, because we were making the jokes of, oh my gosh, are the Giants the worst team in the league because they're getting blown out by the Cardinals. Like, that first half was embarrassing. Let's not lie. That was an embarrassing first half. And so that's happening. And then the fact that they come back and win, I'm sitting here thinking of like the Thanos meme of like, did you do it? And they're like, yeah, but what did it cost you? Everything. And it's just like a picture of Saquon. And so it's like, did you avoid being the worst team in the league? Yeah. What did it cost you? Saquon's ankles. Like, so hopefully Saquon can come back. Luckily, the reports are saying he's going to miss like 3 weeks or something. Because for his injury history, I did get a little bit worried when I heard that he was hurt. So I'm glad that he's going to be at least all right as of right now. But for the Giants, I don't know. It's a good win because in the NFL, there's no style points. It's not like college football. A win is a win, right? But that defense and just the offensive first half, like I don't know, just defense in general was not great considering the Cardinals were able to score that much on you with Josh Dobbs throwing to the corpse of Zach Ertz, and there's, I don't know, like the Cardinals don't have a lot going for them on offense, and yet they were able to have success on you. And then just the fact that the Giants got shut out in the first half, and that was with Saquon too, like he was healthy for that part. I don't know, like I don't really have a lot of faith in the Giants as of right now, considering that through 6 quarters of football, they were outscored 60-0.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, stock is definitely down on the Giants, even though they're 1-1. It's absolutely down in regards to the beginning of the season. And it's just in regards to Saquon injury. Guess what they have? They have a short week. They play Thursday night. They play the 49ers Thursday night. Yeah. So potential tough sledding ahead for the Giants. It was good to see Daniel, like obviously second half, Daniel Jones kind of more was on him. We saw him connect a couple times to Jalen Hyatt, who's supposed to be their deep threat. We saw Waller get more involved. So maybe this would be a good thing in the fact that it forces their passing game to get going and maybe push the envelope in regards to Daniel Jones. We'll see. But yeah, I'm with you. I especially without Saquon, like he is their main focus on this offense. At least keeps the engine running. So yeah, now you go down to Matt Breida, and I forget who their other running back is.
Eric Gray.
Eric Gray, yeah. So definitely lose your best offensive player.
Yeah,
is like you said. So we'll see. And for the Cardinals, win-win for the Cardinals. They showed that, hey, we could beat y'all, but no, we're not gonna.
And that's 2 weeks in a row. The Cardinals have been competitive. So
competitive, and then man, we blew it late.
That's the result you want, though. You know, you want to lose, but you want to lose in style.
And I will say, like, it's obviously a complete rebuild year for them. They're starting. Hey, Zaven Collins, and he's starting to pop a little bit. So maybe they're starting to get some value out of him, see what he can be, and like Jalen Thompson, their other safety got a pick. So obviously, unfortunate they lose Buddha for a while, but yeah, it's a good time to figure out who you got. Maybe try to find some gems or some late guys to fill in for the future. So and James Conner always solid, but yes, crucial win for the Giants, crucial comeback. They definitely needed it, and yeah, for the Cardinals, still staying alive and in the leader house for the tank for Caleb Williams. So we'll see though if he does go out, but nonetheless, there's that. Now let's go to the game that I know you definitely knew about and can wax poetically, and that is your Dallas Cowboys They handle Zach Wilson and the Jets 30-10, shut them out in the second half. What were your thoughts and analysis here?
Cowboys defense is the real deal. I know it was Daniel Jones and Zach Wilson, so I'm not going to sit here and say that the Cowboys are like battle tested as of right now, but the defense is gonna win the Cowboys a lot of games, like just flat out. When they play offenses that are not the best, it feels when you play a defense this good. We've seen it over the years. The Niners have had some defenses like this. Just different teams. When you play defenses this good, you're going to win a lot of games that it feels almost impossible for you to get upset because the team that's the worst offense it's just so hard. And we saw that for the Jets. Like, they didn't even really try to run the ball. Like, Zach Wilson was their leading rusher with 36 yards. After that,
and their most efficient rusher.
Yeah. After that, Breece Hall has 9 yards on 4 carries. Michael Carter has 8 yards on 2 carries. Dalvin Cook has 7 yards on 4 carries. Like, they just got nothing. And then in terms of passing, Zach Wilson looked okay to start. That one touchdown that he threw was, I don't want to say lucky, but it was more like the Cowboys defense was just kind of teeing off. They were in man coverage. Dallas runs a lot of man coverage. Like, I think the highest rate in the NFL, almost 60% of the time they're running man coverage. And that's just because they believe in their front seven to get you before anything happens, and they trust their corners to hold up. But regardless, Stephon Gilmore got beat by Garrett Wilson. The safety took a bad angle, Malik Hooker, and so Garrett Wilson took it to the house. But other than that, like, passing wise, they really had nothing else going because that was a 68-yard receiving touchdown. If you remove that, Zach Wilson has 0 touchdowns and 102 yards. So just the defense, like that's all you really got to talk about. It was nice that Dallas got somewhat going offensively in terms of the passing attack. CeeDee Lamb absolutely ate that defense alive, but I mean, that didn't even really matter just because, like I said, the defensive performance was just that impressive. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see Dallas against some better opponents. Because, like I said, I'm not super impressed by either the New York teams as of yet. If Aaron Rodgers played this game, it would have been a lot more sweet as a Cowboys fan because Aaron Rodgers, has beaten us a lot. So that kind of sucks that he wasn't there.
It's caused a lot of nightmares.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping we get some revenge, but it's okay.
Yeah. Like we mentioned last week, I mean, this Jets O-line, work in progress, and going up against that front four, especially with the way Mike has been playing, like seeing a lot of people, and rightly so, like, he was already in the conversation, but he is like, I'm already seeing people saying, man, maybe like people saying you should put bets on him for MVP because I know it's only 2 weeks in, but he's had a really impressive 2 weeks. My boy Sims, he obviously deep in the film, but he was like, man, like he looks even better as a pass rusher. He even looks more explosive. Like, so. And
they're moving him around. Like, he's rushing the passer a lot of times coming straight up the middle, which is like scary.
Yeah. So, obviously, like you mentioned, we'll see if maybe a better offensive lines will be able to handle that, slow that down, take advantage of the one-on-ones. But as of right now, Dallas is just seemingly can do no wrong. So, always a good feeling for any team. So glad that's going. So that is the Cowboys beating the Jets. Sorry, writing this all down. Now we go over to one of the other afternoon games, which actually was kind of exciting. Very exciting, actually, right until the end. And it was the Commanders beating the Denver Broncos 35-33. Crazy game. Russell Wilson gets the Hail Mary off a deflection. But unfortunately, they don't get the 2-point conversion to send it to overtime. So what were your thoughts in regards to your division rival getting a win here?
Kind of a tough game to watch in terms of the second half for the Broncos. Not going to lie. I have some friends who are Broncos fans, and they were very excited in that first half about Russell Wilson's performance. I mean, on paper, he throws for 308 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Now, one was the Hail Mary, but he still had, and like he also was by far their best rusher, 6 carries for 56 yards. So like that was good to see. And also I liked some of the stuff Sean Payton was doing, getting creative. Like they had 2 rushes from Marvin Mims. Mims also, had the 2 big catches downfield. Both were huge plays of over 50 yards. Brandon Johnson had a 50-yard catch. So, like, the Broncos were actually...
That was the Hail Mary, though, I think.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. That was the Hail Mary. But regardless, I mean, that's 3 catches of over 50 yards. Like, the Broncos were airing the ball out, even if it took a Hail Mary to do it. Mm-hmm. Cortland Sutton had a 21-yard reception. So, like, they were making big plays, but it kind of felt like outside of those big plays, the offense kind of got stale. Like Javonte Williams had a 15-yard carry, and then the other 11 carries, he gets like 30 yards. So run game wasn't really working. P. Ryan didn't really get that involved that much in this game, which I felt like maybe they could have stuck with the run a little bit more. I know they ran it 23 times total, but 6 of those are Russ, and those weren't designed runs. And then 2 of those were like the Marvin Mims kind of stuff. And so I don't know. I just felt like they could have rode Javonte and P. Ryan a little bit more, especially considering the lead they had. And also, I don't know. The defense, this just doesn't feel like that talented of a Washington offense. And the fact that you let Sam Howell throw for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, Brian Robinson has largely been criticized for his lack of efficiency, and yet you allowed him to average 5 yards a carry. I don't know. It was like I said, it was a tough performance to watch from Denver in the second half. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I'm going to criticize their offense a little bit. Denver's specifically late in the first half. It was like I've been talking about turnovers, but a key turnover as they fumbled the ball. It was like around midfield. They're just entering Washington territory, and then it was 21-3, and then Washington goes down, scores a touchdown, 2-point conversion, 10-point game. Denver goes 3 and out, and then Washington is now back in the game because they end the half with the field goal, 7-point game. And then from there, like you mentioned, it was kind of tough sledding. I feel like that kind of deflated the Denver offense. And like you alluded to, not a lot of efficient, like strung together drives. It seemed very reliant on those big plays or chunk plays early on. And yeah, it's still a concern of mine. Is Russell Wilson, can he, outside of those big plays, can he be surgical? Can he have the right timings with his receivers? Now granted, obviously they have some missing. I mean, Judy still probably not 100%, and new offense, but yeah, I'm with you. It was disappointing performance by Denver, really on both sides of the ball. I'm not so shocked about them letting Brian Robinson kind of run all over him, because it was kind of a thing at the end of last year. It was like, okay, you can run on this defense, but I'm with you. Like, at least in regards to the pass defense, like it seemed like Sam Howell really didn't really have any issues in regards to just dissecting them. So, and we know that Patrick Etane's really good, and they still have Justin Simmons. I almost said Jonathan. I always get them mixed up, but Justin Simmons. So, and also obviously Kareem Jackson got ejected or got thrown out of this game early, so maybe that contributed to it. Nonetheless, yeah, like, and I will say, I mean, Randy Gregory's been meh for them. So, yeah, I don't know what the fix is for Denver, and obviously it sucks that there was no call on that pass interference on the 2-point conversion, because I feel like that it is pass interference, and I'm usually pretty lenient on that because he got mugged. But nonetheless, good one for the Commanders. It's good to see that the Eric Bieniemy hire seems to be working out, at least as of right now. You can safely kind of say that. We'll see, obviously, going forward, but it seems like he's at least gotten Sam Howell playing confidently, and this whole offense kind of clicking. Something we really haven't seen in Washington since the Kirk Cousins days. So maybe that's something they can build on. But big win for Washington. Denver, we'll see if they can right the ship going forward. But now, let's head on over to the Sunday night game in the AFC East, and that was between the Patriots and the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins end up winning this one 24-17. Almost came down to a lateral, basically, that was just inches from the first down line to keep the Patriots' last drive alive. Nonetheless, Dolphins win here. What were your thoughts, John?
A good win for the Dolphins. I was actually pretty impressed with what I saw out of them in terms of the offense, because I did think that Bill Belichick was going to probably provide a bit more of a challenge, but they found a different way to win than we've historically seen them so far, which I think kind of bodes well for them long term, because it's felt like if they were going to win games, it was usually going to be through the air, but Raheem Mostert really shows up. He has a really big game, and I think that's good to see, because at the end of the day, there's going to be some defenses that are going to figure out how to take away Tyreek Hill. Now, it's not always going to work the whole game. Like, Tyreek still got a touchdown here, but there's going to be some defenses that are going to figure out how to at least quiet him a little bit. And the Patriots are kind of one of those teams where they'll double Tyreek, then they'll put and they'll do that. They'll often double team the best receiver, and then whoever your second best receiver is, they'll let that guy go one-on-one and force him to beat you. And that's why we see Jalen Waddle have a little bit more of a impressive performance with 86 yards. But still, in terms of passing, like, it wasn't the craziest day for the Dolphins, but they won because they found different ways to win. And so I think that was pretty good. Also, I liked what I saw out of their defense. I mean, you come out of week one where, although you won, the Chargers gashed you on the ground, and you for the most part do a really good job in this game against the Patriots running game. Obviously, Mac Jones, he had that 18-yard rush, but outside of that, like, they pretty much shut down everything in the run game. Ramondre only averaging 3.3 yards per carry. Zeke was not efficient either, which that still sounds weird to say. Zeke, the Patriots, I don't know. It feels weird to see.
Yes.
But yeah, overall, I was impressed from this win from the Dolphins. I know the Patriots are 0-2, and a lot of people are going to think that this wasn't that great of a result, but beating Bill Belichick is always going to be impressive to me.
Yeah, and the Patriots were in this game. Like, it's not like they were absolutely blown out. It's like kind of how I said last week. It's just this. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a Tom Brady effect. Maybe it is, but it's just right now it seems like New England is doing un-New England things in regards to that Demario Douglas fumble was unfortunately very crucial because they were driving then, and it's not really Demario's fault. It's a great punch out by Bradley Chubb, but. All of a sudden that happens and they're in Miami territory, and then now, it was 3-0 and then Miami scores then. And, that's literally 7 points off that turnover. And I think this shouldn't come to a shock at all, but Patriots offense too, like outside or anybody really, does anybody really scare you in the passing game? I mean, Devontae Parker, all due respect to Devontae Parker, just always he's either dealing with the injuries, but even when he's on the field, like he's never been a guy where I'm like, okay, he's my number one, right? And especially because of the injury history. And they've been paying him like he's number one, and he's still there. We know Hunter Henry, his better days are behind him, pre-ACL Chargers days. And Mike Gesicki, they're trying to get at him, but we saw he was inefficient. And Kendrick Bourne, Juju Smith-Schuster, like these aren't guys that are going to scare you consistently, like I said, at least as the number one. So be nice for them if they can get Mac Jones a weapon. Probably not going to happen this year, but I will say at least the offense seems to be better than last year, which I know isn't saying a lot considering they had two guys as offensive coordinator, and neither one of them had offensive play calling experience, as opposed to now Bill O'Brien. There does seem to be a better flow, that's all I have to say, because obviously Miami was the better team and is the better team, like just talent wise, and that obviously comes to show here. So, big win for the Dolphins, kind of further reinforcing that, hey, Patriots, you're no longer ruling this division. Not that the Patriots have in a while, but for some teams, like you mentioned, still good to beat Bill Belichick. You still got to face him, and he still deserves respect. So, good chess match there between him and Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins, as the Dolphins get that crucial win there. But now let's head over to the Monday night games. Got to start with the first one of the doubleheader, which both these games were kind of meh, but definitely this first one, as it was with the New Orleans Saints getting the win 20-17 over the Carolina Panthers. Like I said, not like I alluded to, it wasn't the prettiest game. A lot of turnovers here. What were your thoughts in regards to Saints Panthers?
First off, I thought Bryce Young had a decent game. He did get sacked 4 times, which sucks, and he was kind of under siege throughout the game. He did have that fumble as well, but when you're going against a defense like the Saints, it's going to be tough. The Saints, like, this is kind of the way that I expect the Saints season to go, to be honest, is these kind of games. They are 2-0. I don't know how much that could, persist throughout the year, but just specifically just because of who they played so far, and I do think they're going to have some better opponents. But at the same time, we talked about this in the preseason or during our predictions and all that. Like their schedule is not that difficult. But these are the kind of games that I think the Saints are going to like live in throughout the year. Their defense is really good, dating back to like halfway through the whole season last year. Like their overall totals for games, I think they had one game total where you take both team scores and it was over 60. So like they don't have a lot of crazy high scoring affairs that they're going to get stuck into, and they play good football. And so I expect that to kind of be the way that this team is going to ride this year. Is they're going to play good defense. Things are going to get a little bit ugly. The offense might turn the ball over, blah, 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 whatever happens. But for the most part, they'll be all right because the defense can hold them in it. And as long as their playmakers being Taysom Hill, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, all these kind of guys can stay healthy and make things happen, then they'll be all right. It was unfortunate that Jamal Williams is dealing with injuries, but Kamara should be back soon. Only one more game without him. So, yeah, overall, good win for the Saints. Not crazy impressive, but honestly, I don't really expect most of the results to be crazy impressive. And other than that, really upset that Adam Thielen got that garbage time touchdown because, as we talked about earlier, lost me a fantasy game.
Yeah, garbage time's tough. Yeah, it's hard to grade Bryce Young. That's why I'm with you. I think he had a good game. It's just, no run game. I mean, Miles Sanders extremely inefficient, and Chuba Hubbard 2 for 16. But as a whole, relatively inefficient there. And like we mentioned last week, there's not a lot of wide receivers on top of that you can, like Thielen's obviously the most dependable one, and then Chuba Hubbard was the next leading receiver in terms of receptions and yards. He had 5 for 34. So obviously Jonathan Mingo, he had 8 targets, so maybe they're trying to get him more involved. And Hayden Hurst has always been solid, so get him more going. But yeah, like you said, just different timelines for these teams. Saints obviously still in win now mode with Derek Carr, and it's nice to see them still incorporate Taysom Hill in different ways in the run game and pass game and receiving game. Good to see Chop Up Mike, by the way, Michael Thomas. Let me knock on wood.
Yeah.
But if he stayed healthy through 2 games, he hasn't obviously put up the numbers he used to put up, but he's still contributing. And if he can stay healthy with the Olave, Rashid, Shaheed, both they're more intermediate deep threats. It could be a very interesting trio there, and especially if they get Kamara back. This could definitely be a team that can continue to make noise as the season goes on. And as long as Derek Carr, also takes care of the ball. He only had 1 interception. I don't know why I said there's. I guess I only really watched the first half in depth, so I remember there's an interception there, and then they fumbled right. I think Carolina fumbled it right back to them or something. I forget. Maybe been switched around, but nonetheless, big win for the Saints. I think you had them in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, I had them and the Falcons in the playoffs. So
okay, so yeah, and you're not the only one. My boys, I know a lot of people are high on the Saints and the Falcons, but the Saints too, because like you said, I do remember those that I think they technically have the easiest schedule.
Which
this season, but
was a big reason why I picked them. I was like,
it's
an easy division, super easy schedule. Like I said, we talked about it before the season. It's so easy.
Yeah, and pretty solid, still a solid win now roster too. So it's not like their window's a couple of years away. So, but now let's go over to what was a very interesting game the other Monday nighter, and it was the Steelers literally stealing this game away early and late, really, against the Browns, 26-22. What were your thoughts here?
Well, you go first because you sent that stat that I want you to talk about because that's crazy.
Okay. Now, this is via Reddit, and this is honestly though I got this from my good friend Onik, who's a diehard Steelers fan. So of course he's in the Steelers Reddit. This is from Reddit via Jimbo831. Wild but true. The Steelers entered the fourth quarter Monday night trailing by 3 points. They generated just -7 yards of offense in that fourth quarter, and yet they won the game by 4 points. And there people in the comments further added some stats, and once again, people can try to stat check this, but from what I watched, it sounds about right. It's supposed to be dangerous, but he changed the A to 4 and the rust to 5. He goes, they ran 0 plays in the red zone last night. And then someone commented on top of that, 0 plays inside the 30, so within the Cleveland 30 into the touchdown. So that's wild. And yet the Pittsburgh Steelers still end up winning. This is the perfect epitome of a Mike Tomlin game where it's we don't need our offense to score points. Our defense can score points, which is still wild because yes, they start off the game with that pick 6 and then they end the game with there's a scoop and score, right? With TJ Watt, I almost said JJ. And then, other than that, the only other touch that they had was that Pickens, that kind of broken play where it was a good throw over the middle, and then Pickens just it was a foot race from there on out, and Pickens won that foot race on that 70-yard touchdown. But yeah, it was wild game. I wonder. I mean, obviously it did, but I wonder how much, like, if it truly did affect, like, obviously losing Nick Chubb and the way they did lose Nick Chubb obviously hurts the Browns and emotionally, but Jerome Ford filled in nice. But yeah, Watson, I think it's maybe fair to start criticizing, say, is he ever going to be the same guy as before? I'm just saying. I'm not saying it will happen. I just want to throw it out there. We're, 8 games into the sample size, and it hasn't looked great. But yeah, what were your thoughts?
At least for Watson on the interception, who was a Harrison Bryant. This is, I talked about this at length about Dak last year, but there needs to be a stat for like interceptions that are the receiver's fault, because at least on that was not his fault. But he did fumble 2 times. And I will say outside of the interception, like if we remove that play, because I feel like that's why a lot of people are blaming him, is because they just look at the stat line and they see that. But he just doesn't look like he has the same like pop. I don't know. He's not making the greatest decisions. Like nothing really feels special. And the last time that we saw him 3 years ago, he was a top 5 quarterback, despite the fact that the team was terrible. And so, yeah, I do think it's time to start criticizing him. He had a full offseason with the team. He did play some games last year. And last year, you get the excuse of you weren't around the team because of the suspension and all these things. And so, lack of chemistry and you couldn't practice and blah, blah, blah. You don't have that excuse anymore. Like he's been there. And so I think it's certainly time to start criticizing him. I also do think that it's time for him to step up, because with Nick Chubb out, you got to be that quarterback that they paid $250 million for, because you were not cheap. And so far you have not been that guy, and you need to be that guy. So, they're 1-1. The season is not over by any means. I've already started to see some rumors of, do they trade for Jonathan Taylor, which would certainly be interesting, because I do think that would be a potential big move that could save their season. I don't know how that would work with like Nick Chubb's contract and all that, because if you're going to trade for Taylor, it's obviously under the assumption that, you have
to give him an extension.
Yeah, you're giving him an extension, and Nick Chubb is on the outs if that's the case, because he's getting paid a lot. He has this year and then next year left on his deal. And you could cut him for, you have an out after this year. So you never know. Because I will say for Nick Chubb, unfortunately, he has not really had an injury history in the NFL so far. But if anybody remembers back in college, the guy had a terrible injury, absolutely destroying basically his entire leg. Like the fact that he came back and was as good as he was in the NFL was kind of surprising. I'm not going to lie, just because of how bad that injury was. And this one did not look pretty either. I don't know. Have they officially released what the injury is yet?
I think it was like multiple like CLs. I think that's what I saw. I'm sorry, I don't have the full.
I'm trying to look it up because I don't want to misquote what it was, but regardless, it did not look pretty. That's the kind of injury, considering what we know about his college injury, and I'm just hoping that he can come back, because that was the kind of injury that you're sitting there and you're looking at his age and his previous injury history. He's 28 for anyone who doesn't know. And this is kind of the point where running backs start to fade, and you're wondering, does he have it in him to come back and be who he once was? So I don't know. We'll certainly see. I'm hoping for his sake he does, because he's one of the most fun and exciting running backs to watch. And I do think that he's criminally underrated, because out of a lot of offenses, like, this guy is the offense. He has been for quite some time. He just like Derrick Henry. He doesn't quite get the respect that Derrick Henry does, just because Derrick Henry has not had the greatest of talent around him. Like, they had A.J. Brown, but that was kind of it. It's for like, the Browns have had flashy names like Odell and Jarvis Landry and Amari Cooper, and they trade for Deshaun Watson. There's been like a lot of flash, but he is the offense. So I feel really bad for Nick Chubb, but it'll be interesting to see how they move forward, because I don't know if Jerome Ford was impressive, but I don't know if they're going to only rock with Jerome Ford. Maybe they bring back Kareem Hunt. Maybe they trade for Cam Akers. Maybe they go home run and they go get Jonathan Taylor. I don't know what it is, but I'm assuming they'll bring in somebody, even if that somebody is going to back up Jerome Ford.
Yeah. I'm gonna say I think they stick with Ford. I think something we kind of talked about was the Rodgers thing. It's like, it's tough at this point to bring in someone else and have them be the bell cow. immediately, and it seems like they already have some trust in Ford.
And
But
he
yeah,
looked
apparently
impressive.
and apparently today though they did bring in Kareem Hunt, which I understand. You got to have insurance, for Ford. And how that Ford was your Chubb insurance, so vice versa. So it's looking like they may go with Kareem Hunt, but I wouldn't be shocked if, hey, maybe they do take a swing. It's all depending on price. Do they take a swing on Cam Akers, to fill in because they do have a good O line, or like you said, or go all in with Jonathan Taylor. I'm with you. I doubt the Taylor thing happens, but I wouldn't be shocked if, maybe if they're not obviously because they let Kareem go and they didn't even give him an offer apparently in free agency.
Yeah.
So they were fully willing to go with Jerome Ford as as the insurance. But obviously things change. We'll see how they feel. Maybe they change their mind on Hunt. And like you mentioned with Chubb, like I feel like the whole he's obviously had a better offensive line, but as we've seen, the passing game hasn't always been as amazing. But it just sucks because he's, like you said, in regards to the end of his NFL career, he's been an Iron Man for the most part, at least in regards to running back. And I mean, I hope he can come back. And I'll openly say too, like I'm not just heaping praise on him just do it, but I've always respected the guys who've always kind of proven me wrong, because you mentioned that injury, him coming out. I think if I remember correctly, I know for a fact I had his counterpart. Why am I blanking on this? Sony Michel.
Sony Michel, yeah.
I had him ranked over Chubb.
To be fair, Sony he was a first round pick and Chubb was a second round pick. So you weren't the only one.
And then, and the reason why these running backs are concerned is because also look at Sony Michel, look at Todd Gurley. Michel had a knee injury in his second year or something that really just never was the same afterwards.
Yeah.
Obviously, we all know about Todd Gurley, but hopefully Chubb can buck the trend. He's done it once before, like you mentioned, so maybe he can do it again. And if you haven't seen him when he's in his squats, his videos, the dude's a weight maniac.
Yeah.
Like a weight. So maybe he can bounce back. But tough loss for the Browns. They in theory were the better team here. It's just once again turnovers. Watson also lost a couple of fumbles, and Njoku did too. Like just typical, it's a typical Pittsburgh kind of Mike Tomlin win, where it's like you look at the numbers and you go, how did they really win this? But no, it was just defense and situational football that they took advantage of. So credit the Steelers for getting that crucial win at home to avoid going 0-2 and keeping this division and basically this division a little more interesting going forward, as they always do. But that'll do it for week 2 reactions. Is there anything else you wanted to add that we may have missed?
Free Kyle Pitts. I mean, the Falcons are winning, and I know that I've already seen the discussion of people saying, well, they win because it happened last year where everybody's like, well, they're winning games. Like, this isn't, Arthur Smith made the whole comment about this isn't fantasy. Who cares, man? Like, forget about fantasy football for a second. You drafted the guy 4th overall to not use him. It is insane to me. You can get value out of him. Just trade him, because I'm done with the Falcons. I don't know what it is. I don't know who to blame. The quarterbacks, the scheme. But I just do not buy the fact that Kyle Pitts sucks, considering he had 1,000 yards his rookie year with Matt Ryan, the ghost of Matt Ryan. So free Kyle Pitts. That's all I'll say.
I'll add to that is, once again, respect to Desmond Ridder, but I think it's obvious that they're still kind of managing him.
Yeah, that's true.
He's still really raw. So maybe that'll be the factor. So who knows? But that does it for our week 2 reactions. We'll be back to make our picks against the spread for week 3. At least in regards, so I'll say this before we sign off. The rankings kind of flipped. So I think we were tied, at least pick-wise. And then money-wise, you had this Bengals, Chargers, and Bears.
The ones I went really big on, it did not.
Really Bengals and Chargers, unfortunately.
Yeah, it did not.
Did not come through. They were your Rams this week. It's okay, though. The Bengals also, I went heavy on the Bengals, too, and I paid the price. And I went heavy on Philly. So long story short, we both lost money this week, but John lost a little more than I did.
Yeah, also the ones, the picks that I got right that you didn't were like the Vikings, and I put 10. So 10.
So it wasn't like, and Buffalo was just 40.
Yeah,
so I was like,
exactly. So
you didn't really gain much track. And then the big one was Pittsburgh pulling through on Monday night, because I had 50 and you had 100 on Cleveland.
Yeah.
So that was
it was a rough week for me.
It's okay. Hey, week 2, we're still getting our bearings in regards to who these teams are. Catching their identity. Probably still be doing so. At least I would say at least until October is usually when we have I feel like for me at least, I usually have a good feel for we know who these teams are. So we'll see what happens going forward. as always, feel free to rate and review and subscribe if you're listening on whatever podcast medium or on YouTube. Other than that, for John and myself, that is all.